y la comunicación y la conexión que se genera en este tipo de conferencias, en la red de contacto, volver a juntarnos, conversar, echar la talla. Así que estamos súper contentos, gracias a ustedes por venir. Vienen 2 días increíbles y ahora para mí es un honor, y para 8.8 para todos nosotros es un honor presentar a la Keynote de ahora, que viene de la Electronic Frontier Foundation, que yo creo una de las fundaciones, organizaciones sin fines de lucro más importantes, porque justamente defiende nuestros derechos digitales. Así que para mí es un honor presentarles a Eva Galperin de la Electronic Frontier Foundation. Eva, welcome to A.A Real. Thank you so much for your time and for your support.
Thank you so much for having me, and good morning. Here we go. Hi there. Good morning. Thank you, everyone, for coming out before noon, before there is even beer. My name is Eva Galperin, and I am the Director of Cybersecurity at the Electronic Frontier Foundation, which is how I am answering this question right here. You may know me from some of my greatest hits. I have worked on tracking APTs, including APTs in Syria and Vietnam, in Lebanon and Kazakhstan. I have tracked other APTs, such as Fish for the Future. I have worked on surveillance self-defense, which is the Electronic Frontier Foundation's privacy and security guide, as well as the Security Education Companion, which is our guide for people who are looking to become trainers in the area of cybersecurity. I have also spent a lot of time working on tracking stalkerware, as well as most recently the entire field of Bluetooth-enabled physical trackers. And I'm here to radicalize you. In fact, I'm here to radicalize you with one very simple idea, which is that we've been doing cybersecurity wrong this whole time. Now, when most of us think of cybersecurity, we think of cybersecurity as the act of securing networks and securing computers. So physical objects, you can hold them in your hand, or they're in the cloud, but these are the things that we are securing. And I'm here to suggest that this is actually not what cybersecurity is all about. Cybersecurity should be about securing people, and not just any people, not just people with money, not just people with power, not people at sort of the center of the universe that everything is already designed for. We need to be securing marginalized people, the people whose needs are usually, pushed to the side when it comes to designing platforms, when it comes to designing products, and certainly when it comes to cybersecurity. And in the case of my work, this includes women, people in the global south, LGBTQ populations, journalists, activists, and victims of domestic abuse. This is obviously not a full list of every marginalized population that is out there. This is just a list of sort of the populations that I will be talking about today, which will hopefully give you some examples of ways in which cybersecurity has overlooked these populations and failed them, as well as some examples of what we can do in order to do better, and how we might get around these problems in the future. In order to talk about these things, I am going to start in ancient history, which is to say I might go as far back as 2010. And the reason for this is I'm trying to sort of frame this in the framework of my own work in cybersecurity at the Electronic Frontier Foundation. So I'm kind of going to start with my first experiences in the failures of cybersecurity, both in design and in policy. So we're going to go ahead and start with this. This is actually a pretty famous picture. I think it was taken in either 2010 or 2011, and it was taken in Tunisia. Around this time, we started seeing what was, what Facebook likes to take credit for as the Facebook revolution, as states all over North Africa and the Middle East started to sort of rise up and in some cases managed to successfully overthrow their governments, in other cases not so much. But at the time, people were feeling very positive about it, and a lot of the communication around the protest that was happening at this time was happening over social media, which was sort of newly available in these countries. So it was happening and it was being organized on Facebook, which I understand is now mostly only used to talk to your elderly relatives who believe in QAnon. But at the time was very important, I assure you. People were getting the word out over Twitter. In Syria, Bashar al-Assad had, for a very long time, essentially cut off access to the internet in Syria, and social media was not available, but he did eventually make it available, and as we will learn later in this talk, it was a trap. But we started seeing a lot of people in Syria organizing their protests and dissidents talking to each other on Facebook. Additionally, a lot of the organization was being done over Skype. A lot of journalists were having great difficulty talking to people inside of Syria because they could not physically get to Syria at the time, and so they were relying on sources inside of Syria who could talk to them online, frequently over Skype. I talked to journalist Andy Carvin over at NPR, and I asked him sort of what tools do you use in order to talk to people in Syria? And this was probably in about 2013, 2014, and he said I talked to people using Tor. And the reason that I use Tor is because everybody I know who did not use Tor is now dead. So this is a situation in which having strong operational security turned out to be extremely important. Now, these protests were not just happening in North Africa and the Middle East. The United States, for example, a country that you may have heard of, had a variety of protests all over, mostly under the rubric of Occupy Wall Street, and this was also seen as a big kind of grassroots uprising, everyone chanting, "We are the 99%. And this was all happening against a background of a giant NSA spying scandal. It turned out that since approximately 2003, under the Bush administration, the NSA had been secretly setting up secret rooms in telcos all over the United States and copying all of the internet traffic that was going through in order to spy on everybody. Now, this was a big deal in the United States because the NSA is specifically banned from spying on Americans. Spying on foreigners is fine. Spying on Chileans, do it all day long. You want to spy on people in North Africa and the Middle East, knock yourself out, but do not touch the precious American user data. And we started to see more and more proof of these programs come out. For example, in 2006, a very nice grandfather walked into the office of the Electronic Frontier Foundation in the city of San Francisco with an armload of papers. And he said, "So I have evidence that the NSA is installing these machines in secret rooms in telcos all over the United States. And I know this because I work for AT&T, which is a big telco in California, and I am an engineer, and I am the person who installed the machine. What I have brought to you are the plans for the machine. And we used this as the basis of our lawsuit against AT&T for taking part in this warrantless wiretapping of Americans. This work later went on to inspire Edward Snowden. This is one of the reasons why the very first document that Edward Snowden leaked as part of the Snowden leaks was an order from the United States government to Verizon, saying, you must copy all of this data in secret rooms full of gear that we will send you in order to install. And this became the basis of our lawsuit against the NSA, which went on for many years. So this is sort of the big picture. And at the time, again, most internet traffic was unencrypted. It was unencrypted at the sort of the web browser level, so anybody who worked at a telco could intercept the traffic and read it without any problems. And also most communications, such as Messenger or SMS messages and such, were also unencrypted. So the information was just there for governments to reach out and grab, which is something that they frequently did. And if you want a good overview of what was going on in North Africa and the Middle East at the time, and how this was not actually all a Facebook revolution, and the social media took way too much credit, and also that they should shut up, I strongly recommend this book, Twitter and Tear Gas, written by Zeynep Terfeksi. So, against all of this background, one of the interesting things that was happening was that the Tunisian government launched a sort of cyber attack against Tunisian users. And what they did was, back in 2011, they launched a JavaScript injection attack that siphoned off the usernames and passwords of Tunisians logging in to Google, Yahoo, and Facebook. And again, the reason that they were able to do this is because all this traffic is unencrypted and they control the telcos. One of the things that they did was they downloaded a bunch of activists' messages, and if they were feeling particularly mean, sometimes they would then lock the activists and journalists and dissidents out of their accounts. So the first thing that I asked for in my job at EFF was for Facebook to make its logins default to HTTPS. Definitely in Tunisia, where we saw that there were all kinds of very serious problems, where accounts were especially vulnerable. Google and Yahoo logins were already defaulting to HTTPS, so it's not like it was very hard, and it's not like there weren't other people doing it. And we also asked Facebook to consider allowing pseudonymous accounts for users in authoritarian countries where political speech under your real name is dangerous and potentially deadly. Lots of Tunisian activists were unable to reinstate their Facebook accounts because Facebook had enabled a real names policy. Which brings us to sort of the next big fight that I had, which we called the NIM Wars. Around this same time, Facebook and the short-lived Google social media product, Google+, both instituted what they called a real names policy. They were requiring people who were using their platforms to use their real names. And what is a real name? Well, your real name was the name on your government-issued ID. And so in order to sort of link your real name to your government-issued ID, you had to send your government-issued ID or a copy of your government-issued ID to Google or to Facebook in order to prove that, yes, this is in fact you. This creates, again, like a huge database of especially sensitive information that Google or Facebook would have to protect. And it also endangered a lot of people in vulnerable populations, including activists who are working in North Africa and the Middle East, and for Occupy inside of the United States, people who were writing under pseudonyms, but it also hit all kinds of populations that you wouldn't normally think of. Trans people, whose names that the names that they ordinarily go for use are not the names on their ID, and if they send in their ID, it outs them as trans. People who are performers, people who have stalkers, victims of domestic abuse who are trying to avoid their abusers. There are all kinds of people who have very important reasons for not using their real names online, and making Google and Facebook the arbiters of what and is not real is an especially dangerous idea. So this idea has taken many forms over the years, and it includes, of course, forcing people to use their real names on social media accounts, forcing people to register their social media accounts in a government database, and forcing people to use what are called name-shaped names on social media accounts, which was eventually what Google Plus had settled for. The whole notion of what constitutes a name-shaped name is a very sort of Western European notion, which is to say that it required both a first and a last name, much to the surprise of, say, all Indonesians who use mononyms. And also, it was a great surprise to many people in Asian populations who frequently take on some sort of Western-sounding first name when interacting with Westerners, just because in the United States we can't pronounce anything in Chinese. In South Korea, they actually went so far as to pass a law requiring people to register their social media accounts with the government. And so they created this large database which was promptly hacked and leaked. And you end up with the famous picture in which I explained to you that data is like oil, and once it leaks, you cannot get it back. This law was later repealed, and it was ruled unconstitutional. But let me tell you, no one learned from their mistakes. As recently as a couple of months ago, some guy named Elon Musk, who is apparently about to be forced to purchase Twitter, included among his many brilliant plans for the future of Twitter a commitment to authenticating all humans. So if you're going to authenticate all humans, you're going to authenticate all Twitter users, what are you going to do? You're going to get their real names. So the next thing that I ended up working on, after I was sort of done fighting the real names fight, was I started seeing that there was malware that was targeting the sort of activists and dissidents and journalists that I was working with in the Middle East. It was not particularly sophisticated. It was showing up in Facebook groups that were sort of built around doing activism in these regions, and sometimes they were even disguising themselves as security products. This one, for example, calls itself anti-hacker, and it was sort of building on the increased concern that people had about the government spying on their communications. I was not the only person who was looking for this stuff, but interestingly enough, I was also targeted by it. This is an email that I was sent, it turns out, by the Vietnamese government. It looks like it comes from Andrew Oxfam. It is about the Oxfam conference, and as you can see, it is inviting me to a conference in Asia, and in order to find out the information about the conference, I needed to go and download these documents, which, surprise, surprise, turned out to be malware. Now, the government of Vietnam showed that they had some understanding of what motivates activists when it comes to clicking on links, which is to say activists love conferences and talking to people and getting up on stage. But if they'd really wanted me to click the link and not take it apart and write a report about it, they should have offered me free flights and hotels. So around this time, I was reading Salon, and I read an article about how a dissident in Morocco had been targeted with malware, and there were no details. So the first thing that I did was I thought for a little while. I looked out into the distance, and I said, "Who do I know in Morocco?" And I called up my friend Hisham Al-Murat, who is one of the founders of an organization doing independent journalism in Morocco called Mamfakench. And I asked him, I said, Hisham, do you know who was being targeted by this malware? And he said, this is easy. It's me. And I said, can you send it to me? And he said, yes. And that is my extremely sophisticated threat hunting technique, ladies and gentlemen. This particular email and its attachment became the first sample of hacking teams' surveillance malware that had been found and analyzed. And at the time, I was really surprised. And I was particularly surprised because there is an entire industry of people whose job it is to sort of track state-sponsored malware and write reports about it. But they couldn't find this stuff that I found by essentially just calling my friend up and asking him to send me the email. And I spent some time asking why. At the time, we were really only just starting to see reports such as this one. This is Mandiant's APT1 report. It is all about that time that China tried to hack the New York Times. They spent an awful long time doing it. You could actually see employees in this particular Chinese surveillance unit clocking in at 8 o'clock in the morning, knocking on the New York Times' systems for the next 8 hours, and then turning around and going home. This report was really extensive, and it was one of the very first times that ordinary people who are not in the security industry got a look at the ways in which journalists and specifically large journalist organizations were being targeted. Now, the reason why China was so interested in hacking the New York Times was that they were looking for the identity of a source about a story about Chinese government corruption. And I am fairly certain that they were not looking for this person's identity so that they could find him and give him a medal. There were definitely going to be very severe physical and painful consequences for this guy if they found him. So, again, you see all of these stories about China. There were reports about Russian malware. I read reports about all kinds of very interesting and sophisticated malware, but I was not seeing reports about the kind of stuff that was targeting my friend Hisham. And the reason for that is that security companies write these reports in order to show off how good they are at security. This is essentially advertising. Look at the way that we protected the New York Times. If we can protect the New York Times against the Chinese government, we can protect your enterprise against hackers. Whereas showing off that you can protect the founder of Mamfakench from a malicious attachment is really not much of a flex. And this is the reason why I spent the next several years collecting this kind of malware and writing reports about it. But in the next couple of years, we started to see more and more reports about activists and dissidents and journalists in the Middle East being targeted. And the reason was this. It was that the targeting got much more sophisticated. It got more sophisticated, and because it was more sophisticated, it was more interesting to security professionals. Suddenly, you get one guy, Ahmed Mansour, with 3 different tools which were all sitting on the same mobile device, several of which were using O-days. And as we know, every time that a government uses an O-day, that is a nice, big, juicy story and an opportunity for security companies to show off their skills. So on one hand, we did find this sort of big blind spot in the security industry. And unfortunately, the way that the blind spot kind of fixed itself was that the APTs got smarter and more interesting. If you work in security, and I trust that if you are in this room, that you have done some security research at some point, I think the main lesson to learn from this is that sophistication often doesn't matter. It is really important to write reports about people like Hisham, and it is as important to write about people like Hisham as it is to write about Jamal Khashoggi or about Ahmed Mansour. And so if you have samples that are not particularly sophisticated, that don't use any O-days, that are simply, offering activists, free flights and hotels and trips to Asia, you should write about them anyway. So there I was, working on APTs and talking to lots of journalists and activists, when it turned out that the security researcher with whom I had been doing the majority of my work was a serial rapist. So I was really mad. I read an interview with one of his victims, and one of the things that really struck me at the time and that made me furious was how scared she was. She was particularly scared that this guy would compromise her devices, and all of the other people who helped to out him or who were quoted in the story were also very scared. They were, hiding their phones, and they were covering they were covering up their computers, and they were very worried about what we call stalkerware. So what I did was what I always do when I'm really mad. I tweeted. And I tweeted, if you are a woman who has been sexually abused by a hacker who threatened to compromise your devices, contact me and I will make sure that they are properly examined. And then I went to lunch. And when I came back from lunch, I had like 10,000 retweets. And I had approximately 30 messages a day for the next 2 years. I actually still do this work and I still get messages about it. The last time that I did an abuse call was last night after the wine and panel had finished. So this is actually work that I still do. And so as a result of getting all of these messages, I started looking into the entire stalkerware industry. So you may ask yourself, what is stalkerware? Stalkerware is the entire class of commercially available applications that are meant to be covertly installed on a device and are meant to exfiltrate data from that device, including passwords, screenshots, photos. They may make covert recordings on the microphone. If they are on a phone, they may report back location. And this is a very tempting target for abusers for the same reason that it's a very tempting target for governments, because we essentially carry tracking devices around in our pockets all day long. Knowing what somebody is doing on their phone is, in fact, the next best thing to having a strong understanding of the contents of their mind. And a lot of this stuff was really being advertised out in the open. This is an ad from a few years ago for a stalkerware product. And as you can see, this is a blog post about how you catch your cheating partner. It's about how common cheating is and how you can use this product in order to catch your partner. And you can see that the photo is of a man who is holding a woman by the wrist, and she has an injury to her face. To make it clear, this product and this ad is on the side of the guy making the injury. This is for him. So I spent some time studying stalkerware. And I thought, hey, isn't there an entire industry based around the whole notion that, that we're supposed to find things you don't want on your devices, let you know about them, and give you the option of removing them? I think it's called the antivirus. Antivirus is supposed to do this, right? So I did some research. I pulled down the most common samples of stalkerware for Android, and I checked to see whether or not the most popular antivirus products detected them. And I got, on average, about a 60% detection rate, which is crap. So the first thing that I did was I turned around and I talked to the antivirus companies, and I said, hey, why is your detection rate so bad? And they gave me all kinds of reasons, but eventually what I did was I nagged one of the companies enough that they decided that they would not only improve their detection rate, but they would also add a special privacy alert when they recognized that somebody had stalkerware on their device in order to give them the option of removing it. And that company was Kaspersky. Back in 2018, Kaspersky had a lot of very bad press. Little did they know how much worse it was going to get. But at the time, I was perfectly willing to take advantage of their distress and get them to sort of change their policies. As a result of getting them to change their policies, I also managed to convince other AV companies to follow suit. This is sort of picking the weak one off the herd, and then the rest will follow. For example, here you can see a blog post from, I think it's Malwarebytes, about stalkerware, and their detection rates were actually quite high by then. In 2020, AV Comparatives did a survey of Android malware, and they saw that detection rates had, in fact, gone up across the board. Here we are with the sort of top 20 samples of Android stalkerware, and I think something like 8 different AV products. And as you can see, we are looking at detection rates of 85%, 80%, 70%, except for Norton LifeLock, which is 50 and should be ashamed of itself, and G-Data, which is sitting pretty at 100%, good for them. So some of the big problems around getting people to take stalkerware seriously have to do with the norms that we have set. Basically, Kaspersky did a survey last year of 20,000 people in 20 different countries, and they asked, is it okay to monitor your partner without their knowledge? And while 70% of them said no, 30% said yes. 17% of them said only in certain situations. And when asked what those certain situations were, the most common answer was if your partner is cheating. And this bears out in my personal experience in that I still have people coming to me, a specialist in stalkerware, explaining to me that stalkerware is actually okay sometimes because they caught their partner cheating and the ends justify the means. There are other forms of monitoring software that are not stalkerware, but that are still very bad, and that persist, again, because we do not center the experience of marginalized people, but instead center the experience of people who are going to buy software. For example, kidware. This is software which is designed to be overtly installed on somebody's device in order to track everything they're doing, in order to, quote unquote, protect the children. Now, this does, in fact, in some ways, protect children under a threat model in which the threats to children are always coming from the outside. But who is going to protect children from their parents? We also see an increasing use of spying on in the workplace. And one of the reasons for this is because sort of in the wake of COVID, many of us have stopped going into the office. We are often working from home. We are often bringing our own devices. And our office is now sometimes our kitchen or our dining room or our bedroom. Office environments and managers are increasingly concerned that people aren't spending enough time sitting at their desks staring at their computers. And so there is an entire class of software which is devoted to making sure that you are sitting in front of your computer at all times like a good little drone. This is incredibly invasive because, as we all know, as long as you get the work done, who cares where you are sitting and who cares how long you are staring at a screen? We also see very invasive software coming into schools. For several years, it was not safe to go into a school, and so we were seeing a lot of schooling happening at home. People were taking tests at home, and they were using software such as Proctorio. Proctorio is software that is supposed to monitor tests against cheating. It turns out that Proctorio doesn't work very well. And again, this comes back to having failed to center the experiences of marginalized people. The camera that Proctorio uses does not do a very good job of picking up dark-skinned faces. So if you are black, you are 15% more likely to be seen as not there and therefore cheating. Now, really, the difference between stalkerware and all of these other types of products is deception. It is very important for people to be able to freely give their consent. But these other products are also bad because even though they are overt and they are not designed to fool people into thinking that they are not being spied on, they are not in situations in which people are free to give their consent. Their consent is coerced. And consent is not really consent if you are not in a position to say no. If you are not in a position to say, no, I am simply not going to take this test, or no, I am not going to go to this school, or no, I'm going to go get another job. These are often not things that people are really in a position to do. Which brings us to sort of the very last thing that we're going to talk about, which are physical trackers. Now, it's my understanding that there is going to be the final keynote is also on physical trackers, so I'm going to keep this sort of very high level. So last year, Apple put out a new product called the iTag. The iTag is about maybe an inch and a half wide. It's a sort of white disc. It's very small. And it is designed to help you find things that you are worried you are going to lose. So you can attach it to your keys, or you can stick one in your wallet. And when you leave your keys at the office, or you forget your wallet at the restaurant, it will let you know, and you can go back and get it. And this is great. There's a lot of demand for such a product. Unfortunately, it's also a great product for stalking. So a lot of people see this product and they think, oh, this is great, because I am going to use it to foil thieves. I am going to put an AirTag in my bicycle for when my bicycle gets stolen, or in this package that I am sending for when the package gets stolen. And in this way, I am going to be able to find the dirty thief and bring them to justice. And this is exactly the same sort of tracking that one uses in order to do stalking. Now, Apple is not the first company to have thought of physical trackers. Tile, for example, is a product that has been around for many years. But the thing that Apple did differently is that it's using a vast Bluetooth network made up of every single Apple product that has Find My enabled. So you lose your wallet with your iTag in it, and it simply waits for somebody with an iPhone or some sort of product with Find My on it, and Bluetooth turned on to go by, and it reports its location back to that thing, which reports it to the next item with Bluetooth, which reports it to the next item with Bluetooth, which reports it to the next one. And this gives you an extremely powerful tool for long-range tracking, which is something that Tile simply did not have. Tile products would communicate over Bluetooth with phones that had the Tile app installed on them. And you could go all day without walking by somebody else with the Tile app installed on their phone. But I dare you to go an entire day without getting within Bluetooth distance of somebody with an Apple product. Unfortunately, Apple had some really interesting blind spots. Apple was aware that the iTag could be used for stalking and spying. And so they included a lot of really interesting features in order to make this kind of stalking more difficult. If you had an iPhone, you would get a little pop-up notice saying that there was a AirTag that was moving with you. If, for example, somebody left an AirTag in your car, so you're moving at the same time, it would give a notice to your phone. Also, once the AirTag was out of range of the phone that it was originally paired to for 36 hours, it would start to emit a beep. Now, this beep was actually not a great solution. The beep was about 60 decibels, which is not very loud. It's about as loud as my dishwasher. I was able to silence it by putting it between the cushions of the back seat of a car. You couldn't hear a damn thing. And you still got 36 free hours of spying, which I was really not into. Furthermore, if you were an apostate who dared to live outside of the Apple ecosystem, you did not get the pop-up notice. And so you had to rely entirely on the sound alert, and the sound alert, as we pointed out, is not very good. One of the other problems that we saw was that the time for the beep would reset every time that the AirTag was within Bluetooth distance of the phone that it was originally paired to. So if you were being spied on by a person that you work with and therefore see every 24 hours, or a person that you live with who wants to know where you're going all day but who sees you at the end of the day, then the beep would never go off. And so we started to see all kinds of reports of AirTags and tiles being used as part of spying and stalking. And we see a lot of these news articles to this day. Apple responded by doing a couple of different things. The first is that they reduced the time until the beep started from 36 hours to 24 hours. So now you have only 24 hours of free spying. Yay. And the second was that they put out an Android app. And let me tell you, getting Apple to write an Android app is not an easy task. One of the biggest problems with the Android app that they put out, which is called Tracker Detect, is that it does not have feature parity with the abilities of the iPhone. The iPhone will automatically tell you if you are being tracked. If you are existing in the Apple ecosystem, you have to know about the app, download the app, and you have to run a scan every single time in order to see if you are being followed by an AirTag. Interestingly enough, Tile followed suit. They had almost no anti-stalker protections before, and now they finally have an app. But unfortunately, what we have introduced is a sort of hellscape. which is to say that if you are a person who is worried about being tracked by physical trackers, now what you need to do is you have to download every app for every kind of physical tracker and then run a scan with every kind of physical tracker every time that you are worried that a physical tracker might be in the room. This is not the outcome I am looking for. So one of the things that I have been asking the physical tracker makers to do is to come up with a standard, to publish that standard, and that should enable third parties to write apps which will scan for every kind of physical tracker at once. Furthermore, it will also enable the makers of OSs to add this capability into the background of their OS in the same way that you have it in iOS for tracking AirTags. And then, finally, we will have feature parity. It's a lot of work. I'm not going to be done anytime soon. If there's one thing that I want you to take away from this talk, it is that the decisions you make matter, that the people who are in this room are important, that when you make decisions about what your platform's policies are going to be, about what kind of security you are going to have, about what your product is going to look like, about who is going to use it, about how they're going to log in, about what a legitimate login looks like, what a legitimate name looks like, what a legitimate user looks like, where that user is coming from. Every single one of those is a cybersecurity decision, and it is up to you to center the needs of the people who are marginalized instead of the people who are already being catered to. Because when you build products for the people who are already at the center of the conversation, for the people who already have power, you are leaving so many people out in the cold, and often you are putting them in physical danger. So it's really up to you to change that. Go forth and be radicalized. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Great talk and keynote. Thank you. ¿Alguien tiene alguna pregunta para Eva? No se preocupen, la pueden traducir. Eva está escuchando por micrófono, así que ¿alguien tiene alguna pregunta? ¿Sí? Ya, pues ¿quién se atreve? Vamos. Ninguna, en serio. ¿Por acá? ¿Los expositores? ¿Alguna pregunta para Eva? They are very shy. ¿No? ¿En serio? Acá. Bien, Sibel.
I work in the cybersecurity industry, but my background is activist. So how can we do more? You know, like my company, for example, don't work with this talkware. It's my favorite theme to talk in conferences. I love this theme. So what we can do, like to ask for my company, oh, how can we do? What can we do to help, you know, these people? For me, it's an issue always. For over 10 years, I work with this as an activist, but not for my company. My company said, yeah, it's just for big ones, you know, big organizations. So what we can do, you know, how can you, a call for action for our companies, you know, I say this every single day, but what do you suggest?
It depends on what your company does.
Threat intelligence, for example, would be awesome.
If you do threat intelligence, I think that the most important thing that you could be doing right now is to look at the threats to journalists and activists and publish your findings. It is extremely important to publish your findings because unless people know about them, they don't know how to counter those threats. So just silently adding it to your list of TPPs does not help people nearly as much as writing a report and contacting a journalist, because people are going to read those stories, and those stories really matter. If you can link the targeting to a specific activist or a specific organization, that really helps. Because if there's one thing that journalists care about a lot, it is personal stories. So if you can say, this specific person over here was being spied on, or this particular organization was being targeted, that's actually really powerful.
Thank you. Acá, excelente.
Hola, mira, muchas empresas a nivel mundial trabajan en Windows. En Chile yo creo que el 90% trabajan en ese ambiente, el cual es muy vulnerable. Le decía que muchas empresas en Chile y en el mundo trabajan en ambientes Windows, un ambiente que es muy vulnerable. A nosotros, con mi compañero acá, no nos cuesta nada entrar a cualquier plataforma Windows sin clave, sin contraseña. ¿Por qué la gente no trabaja en ambientes Linux, como cualquier lanzador, Ubuntu, Kali? No podemos entrar a esas plataformas, nos cuesta mucho. Sin embargo, creemos que es muy vulnerable Windows, pero las empresas, creo que por un tema cultural, no lo hacen. ¿Por qué? ¿Qué cosas deberíamos implementar en Chile educativamente como para traspasar el ambiente Windows a Linux? Muchas gracias.
Unfortunately, I have a lot of experience training journalists and activists, and one of the most important principles of doing this training is to meet people where they are. If you come into a room of journalists and activists who are being targeted by governments, and you say what you need to do is you need to throw all of your Windows boxes into the sea and run Kali Linux, you will feel better, but then they will not do it. And then nobody will be safer. You will just pat yourself on the back and say, I am a great hero. I told them to do the right thing, but then they didn't implement it. So I think that one of the most important things is to make sure that everybody who is running a Windows environment takes their patches, that everybody embraces the wonder that is Patch Tuesday, and also that they are much more aware of the different ways in which they can protect their user logins. This is especially important. You can do a lot just by locking down people's logins and getting them to use strong two-factor authentication. That really reduces the attack surface a lot.
Gracias. ¿Alguien más por acá? ¿No? Ah, ¿dónde?
Where can I find Stylecore samples to do reverse analysis and be able to help people in need as you say does?
Behold the wonder of GitHub. So I helped to found an organization called the Coalition Against Stalkerware. We have a website, www.stopstalkerware.org, and there is a link to the repository of stalkerware samples there.
Thank you.
Acá. Don Cristian.
Thank you very much for that great talk. So later this evening or maybe tomorrow, I don't remember, there will be a talk about different campaigns here in South America from different countries, I guess 12 different countries. So it's most of the continent actually. So I'm curious to know whether you have been involved in some APT campaign occurring here in South America, and not particularly here in Chile, but maybe in some other country?
Mexico.
All
also
right.
Mexico.
And
Mexico.
Okay. And can you...
Man, does the Mexican government enjoy buying NSO Group's products.
I'm sure, yeah. And can you give us some details about that?
I mean, most of it ends up in Citizen Lab reports. You know, I am not as good at reversing software as Bill Martak by any stretch of the imagination. So all of the technical details do get out. I think we're also seeing some other software being used, and definitely, other threat actors exist, but probably the most high-profile ones, or at least the ones that have had reports released about them in the last couple of weeks, are all in Mexico. There have been some other really interesting APTs that I've tracked, such as PackRat, that have never been fully attributed, which I think is really interesting.
Well, thank you very much.
Hi, great presentation. I loved it. My question is, does the EFF or any other organization you know offers like some sort of basic measures users should apply in their daily life to protect their privacy or their security?
Indeed we do.
And also?
ssd.eff.org, surveillance self-defense.
And also, I worry sometimes that privacy and security for users, like when you do recommendations, sometimes they conflict. Like for instance, users are really, or people, they're really worried about losing their information. But then the easiest thing for them to do is like just put it in OneDrive or put it in Google Drive. But that's not really like a privacy-focused solution. So what do you think about that? What would you recommend in those cases?
I would recommend that the people do some threat modeling. Think about what it is you want to protect and who you want to protect it from. If you are concerned about your partner getting your hands on your data and you feel like you can keep your Google Drive account from being compromised by your partner, then Google Drive is not the worst choice. If you are concerned about governments or law enforcement coming with a warrant for the contents of your Google Drive from a country where Google accepts warrants, and you can check that by looking at their transparency report, then storing your data on Google Drive is not a good idea. You want to fully encrypt that stuff and maybe leave it in your house somewhere safe, someplace where governments and law enforcement will not find it. So it is very hard to find a one-size-fits-all solution for everybody, and I try really hard to make sure that I am not making the perfect the enemy of the good. I want to give people advice that they will actually take instead of advice that's just going to make me feel good because I told them to do the right thing. And I would say that's almost certainly the hardest thing about giving advice to users in at-risk populations, because people who are vulnerable, people who are at risk, people who are already having a very bad day, who are worried about governments or law enforcement or their families or a stalker or a former employer spying on them, don't have time to become information security professionals. And so we need to give them the easiest solutions that solve the problems that they actually have, instead of telling them to use very complicated products that they may not be able to use correctly, or to engage in practices that they may not be able to follow.
Thank you.
I mean, probably the best example, I will tag this on real quick, is for a very long time, we used to simply tell journalists, well, just don't open sketchy attachments. Like, you won't get infected if you don't open sketchy attachments. And this is clearly advice from somebody who has never been a journalist in their entire life, because 90% of being a journalist is opening sketchy attachments. That's practically the whole job, and telling people not to do that is a very good way to get ignored.
Thank you so much, Eva.
My pleasure.
Por favor, un aplauso para Eva, nuestra keynote. This is for you.
Excellent.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.